We are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from my office located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our virtual artist talk given today by David Roswell. He was a short-term resident artist at Baltimore Clayworks from May through June 2022. Currently, his work is available for sale in our shop. For more information about our artist talks, visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org. I will now turn it over to David.
Great. Hi, everybody, and welcome. First, I want to say a big thank you to Baltimore Clayworks for both having me for the short-term residency last year and also for inviting me to do this talk. It was a great experience, and I'm excited to share a little bit about it with you all. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully, I can make that work. And that should be there. Hopefully you all can see my screen now. So while I was a resident at Baltimore Clayworks, I was beginning to develop some work with a collaborator, Taylor Johnson, who I believe is here with us today. They're an amazing poet and a good friend, and we began an exploration of some work together. I will tell you all that has not fully come, the collaboration has not fully come to pass. So I'm going to be sharing a lot about the process and the exploration, but I do not have a lot of finished work to show you from this body of work that I was developing. I'll be talking about the ideas and the processes, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit where I'm at now. So we began this exploration really thinking about ownership, inheritance, land, family, history. We come from very different places, but really Taylor and I both have really close connections to family land and really wanted to explore that connection. And a lot of that became a question of what makes somebody feel connected to land and how does that exploration work? Something that I think you'll see throughout my talk is that I'm really interested in the ways that processes can lead to ideas, can lead to new processes, can lead to ideas. So a lot of this work about family land that I grew up on for me really started from a process exploration. I, growing up, did a lot of photography, studied photography in class, and then switched into doing pottery, but always have had an interest in photography, in printmaking. And so years ago, actually, I began this exploration of printing images onto clay. You can see here an image. This is a lithographic print onto a tile of one of the barns from the farm that I grew up on. And I got here mostly actually beginning by finding images that would work well for the process. And then that led to this really big exploration of the land that I grew up on. Just to note, this image is actually from a photograph from, I believe, 1904 from the land. You'll see a couple of references to images from lots of history throughout this land that has been in my family for generations. And so as I began spending time in Baltimore during the residency, I was both in the studio, but also on this family land, which is outside of Baltimore. I've been living in Durham, North Carolina now for 7 years or so, but my parents still live outside of Baltimore, and this is the place that I come back to. And I walked the land a lot, really thought about what makes me feel connected. And one of the things that I thought about makes people understand land are maps. And I was really lucky to have an archive from this land and got to go deep into some archival images and research. And you can see here a very old print of a map of the land. And another thing that came up in my archival research of this property was this incredible list of all the plants that had been planted on the land. And I thought that this was a really interesting way of thinking about your connection to land, about ownership. You know, what does it mean to have a list of everything, an inventory of the things on land, and how does this both make us feel connected to it, and also maybe some sense of there was something unsettling to me about the idea of having a catalog of each plant as if it's something that could be bought or sold or exist or not exist. And what you see here in this image is a process shot during the lithographic process. So the way that a lithograph on clay works is you put gum arabic on an image that's printed out from a printer. The gum arabic sticks to the paper, does not stick to the ink. You wipe that away, then roll ink on, which is made from linseed oil and ceramic stain, and then you print that onto clay. So here you can see I was exploring what some of these images that I was finding looked like when it was actually printed on clay. And you can see that this lithographic process is really has very precise in many ways. You can get a lot of detail, and I was really excited about that. And so part of my time at Clayworks was really dedicated to trying out this process. While I feel like I have this lithographic process pretty well under my belt, I understand how it works, I understand how to get good results, there was still another question that I had about printing on clay, and that was about actually exposing a photograph onto clay. With the lithograph, you're rubbing it on there, you're doing a transfer, but I love this idea of combining my experience with photography and my experience in clay. And so I got this beautiful book called Jill Enfield's Guide to Photographic Alternative Processes, which has tons and tons of different processes, including a number of different ways of printing on clay. So while what you see here doesn't look a whole lot different than the lithographic prints that I made, it's actually a fundamentally different process. This is a bichromate, a gum bichromate print. And so this is done where the image is actually exposed using UV light to expose the image. And the way it works is that you make a emulsion of potassium bicarbonate with gum arabic, and then the ink again is mason stains, because that's what will stay when you fire it into the clay. You brush that emulsion on, you dry it with a hair dryer, and then you put a image on top. I used a negative, expose that to light for quite a long time. I think I did about 10 to 15 minutes. And then you remove the negative and very slowly wash the image off, and where the light has exposed the bichromate, the ink sticks, and where it doesn't, it gets washed off. And so you get to see this image appear. I haven't gone a whole lot farther into this process, but I am really excited about the prospect of doing this on more three-dimensional things, using different types of negatives or light. I think that's a really interesting place for further exploration. While I was at Baltimore Clayworks, I was really interested in exploring a lot of different materials, and particularly found materials from this land. So what you see here is an image printed onto scratched glass from a greenhouse that had been on the property. So I found piles and piles of this gorgeous greenhouse glass, and I scratched it because it's very hard to print on glass because it's so shiny. And so I had to do something to texture it. And then here you can see my attempts at layering some of the ideas of the catalog, the images of the barns. And I think that glass is such an interesting idea for some of this, because you can think about how how you see through it, how it's a lens. I think that part of what I was exploring during this time was a complicated relationship to this land, complicated because of the wealth that my great-grandfather amassed, and how that led to my connection to this land. Complications because of ownership of land that was unceded from indigenous tribes. I did some really interesting research into the history of it and found out troubling things about who owned it long before my family did, including, I think, the first sheriff of Baltimore County, who was very invested in protecting the settlers from the indigenous folks who were already there. And so thinking about this scratched lens that I was seeing this land through felt apt, and still unformed as an idea. But another material that I began to work with while I was at Clayworks was wood, and particularly wood from this land. And these are spoons that I carve from fruit trees that I actually planted in my childhood on this land. And this felt like a really intimate way of getting to know the land, really getting inside of it, getting to understand how it felt and the grain. And really one of the biggest things that has continued from my time at Clayworks has been this really deep excitement about carving wood, and particularly carving spoons. And here's a cherry spoon that I carved, also from a cherry tree on the land. And so there was, really deep investigation into lots of materials, lots of ways of thinking about the connection to the land that I have this connection to. As I said, that work has not fully come out into the world. Y'all are seeing more of it than anybody else has. And so towards the end of my residency, I also began to turn back towards the functional work that I really do mostly in my time before Clayworks, and have really delved back into as a functional potter after that. So actually, while I was in Baltimore, I got to use my parents' kitchen, and let's see if I can play this, to create this video. One of the ideas and projects that I've been working a lot in my functional work are bread baking tools. So here you can see I'm putting flour into a proofing bowl for baking sourdough. And as you'll see in a minute, that proofing bowl will give a really beautiful swirl into a loaf of bread, and then it'll be baked in a cloche that I made. And some of the ideas that I am thinking about in this work is around engaging all of the senses. I think that connecting ceramic and food is so obvious and such a big part of what we do as functional potters, but there's just so much to explore there. And I hope that my work kind of, I think it dovetails with sourdough and with bread so beautifully, because I'm really hoping to evoke warmth and intrigue and desire to engage with my work and with the bread, and really thinking about function as well, and making things to be used in your kitchen, in your home, in your life. And I think that the working on the more conceptual work while I was in the studio at Clayworks really led me to creating this video, really thinking about how I want to tell the story of the work that I'm doing. And I was finding I would be selling these pieces made for baking bread and not really knowing how to share the story with folks. So it's been an exciting connection from the conceptual work back into my functional work, but kind of drawing through some narratives. And you can see that I've continued some of these explorations. Here's a spoon jar that I made here, and with some of the spoon carvings. Another thread that I was playing with and hasn't yet fully come to be realized in the conceptual work is around light. I've been making some lamps, and here are some pendant lights. And I think that the connections of clay and light are really exciting. This is a body of work that I'm really growing right now, thinking about installation in people's homes and in spaces that people use, and how clay can help direct light, can help spread it. So here's some newer work that I'm working on. And as I look into the future, a big thing that I've been working on is opening up a new studio. So here in Durham, after many years of working in my basement, I have opened up a new studio. It's called Studio Maypop. And here's a photo of it, very much in its infancy before I threw any pots. I've now had a few weeks in there making lots of messes, but this is a space where I will be making all of my work, and will eventually also have gallery space for my work and for other people's work as well. So much of this early part of this year now has been turning outwards and thinking about a way to share my work more publicly, not just at craft shows and in galleries like Clayworks, but also having people be able to come to my studio, watch the process of it being made, and then, you know, maybe engage with the work and take some home as well. And I think with that, I'll invite you all to ask any questions, make any comments. You can find me after this online. There's my website and my 2 Instagram handles for my personal page, David Roswell, and the new studio, Studio Maypop.